Guys, we're in the middle of the pandemic and these are trying times. It's hard on our mental health, our mental state, and this is why I love our sponsor today, BetterHelp. They're the largest online counseling platform worldwide. They change the way people get help with facing life's challenges by providing convenient, discreet, affordable access to licensed therapists. BetterHelp makes professional counseling available anytime, anywhere, through a computer, tablet, or smartphone. It's brilliant. Sign up today. Go to betterhelp.com/solvinghealthcare and get 10% off sign-up fees.
COVID has affected us all, and with all the negativity surrounding it, it's often hard to find the positive. One of the blessings it has given us is the opportunity to build an avenue for creating change, starting right here in our community. Discussing topics that affect us most, such as racism in healthcare, maintaining a positive mindset, creating change, the importance of advocacy, and the many lessons we have all learned from COVID. If you or your organization are interested in speaking engagements, send a message to quadcast99@gmail.com, reach out on Facebook at Quadcast, or online at drkwadwo.ca.
Welcome to Solving Healthcare. I'm Kwadwo Kyeremanteng. I'm an ICU and palliative care physician here in Ottawa and the founder of Resource Optimization Network. We are on a mission to transform healthcare in Canada. I'm going to talk with physicians, nurses, administrators, patients and their families because inefficiencies, overwork, and overcrowding affects us all. I believe it's time for a better healthcare system that's more cost-effective, dignified, and just for everyone involved. Yes. Welcome back, Quadcast Nation. We got a special episode. We got the hosts, Amie and Sara from the Gritty Nurses podcast, and we talk all things related to healthcare that has been so paramount. We talk about burnout within healthcare. We talk about systemic racism. We talk about the roles as media personnel. You would have seen them on CBC, CP24, interviews with Brian Goldman. These guys are changing the boogeyman for real. We also talk about podcasting a little bit and advocating for other healthcare providers. So you're going to really enjoy this episode. Before we get into it, I gotta make note of solving wellness. Y'all need to jump on the train. Solving wellness, this is a way of us to address burnout within healthcare. We have virtual workouts, yoga sessions, cooking classes, nutrition tips, sleep advice, mindful meditation. We even have a question and answer session done by myself and amazing psychologist, Kwadwo Kyeremanteng. So y'all gonna love it. Check it. $99 for the year, $9.99 per month. And ta-da, first month is free. All right, let's do this. We're going to bring you the Gritty Nurses, Amie and Sara. Let's just jump on it. Quadcast Nation. Listen here. We got a special, unique, exemplary episode today. We got fellow podcasters in the mix. Sara, Amie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
I'm so pumped.
I'm hyped up. I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
You better be, man. We got the Gritty Nurse podcast crew. And it's always fun getting other podcasters on board because then they're usually the easiest interview, no pressure. Because you know what it's like to be on the interviewing side. So yeah. I'm so appreciative. And this was a long time coming. We've been connecting on social media. Y'all jumped on the Solving Wellness train. So yeah, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having us. Like you said, we've been waiting, so we're ready.
It's like third time's a charm. We got it this time. It's going to be awesome. Yeah,
I feel it. Okay, I'm going to start with Sara. The Gritty Nurse. It's a very successful podcast, but I got to ask, how did this come to be? How did you guys develop this super amazing show?
I think it was really a long time coming. A lot of times people think that we had this aha moment where we're like, let's start a podcast. But I think really it's just a culmination of our experiences in healthcare. So being nurses, being women, we've experienced a lot of challenges in our careers. And I think that it really came to a head when Amie and I worked together. So the backstory is Amie and I have worked together in the past. We've been in 2 different jobs together at 2 different organizations. She's like my work wife, and we experienced a lot of bullying, and we had some mental health struggles at one of our organizations. And it got to the point where we tried to bring our concerns up the chain of command, and it just went nowhere. So then finally, Amie said to me one day, why don't we do a podcast? And I didn't know anything about podcasts. I didn't listen to podcasts. And I'm like, sure, I'm game. Let's just figure all this out. Like, we had to figure out social media. We had to figure out our audio equipment. We really started from nothing. And so in the beginning, we kind of just did it as therapy. We talked about our bullying experiences, our mental health struggles, and really nobody was listening for a long time. And then people started listening, and it's just sort of snowballed from there. So for this whole year, for 2021, we've done, nonstop interviews. We're really enjoying the platform that we've built, the support that we've given to fellow nurses and healthcare providers. And we have a lot of ideas for where we want to go next.
Wowie. I love the story. What I love about it, Sara, is that, you took the power back. So this is one of our themes on our show is like, What can you do? What's action? You were seeing that, there was that struggle where the bullying and being mistreated, and you wanted an outlet and a way to express it. And the beautiful thing is, by doing so, it's a rallying cry. It gets other nurses, other allied health professionals to say, hey, we're not going to accept this. This is not kosher. But yeah, and Amie, do you feel the same way? Was really the push in terms of having that bullying and the mistreatment? Was that the heavy push for you to get this going?
Yeah, I would say that would be the driving force. And I feel like, Sara and I have been through a lot together, and we knew that other people had similar stories. We knew that other people had shared experiences, and we're like, let's talk about ours so other people can be like, yeah, that was me too. I had that happen to me, and, I didn't know how to deal with it. Or, let's say it was about racism. It's like, okay, we're 2 racialized women having a podcast, which is quite unprecedented. If you look at all the other podcasters, most of them are like white males. So for 2 racialized females to kind of come onto the scene and talk about, the things that make us tick, the things that keep us up at night, and just talking about, what really gives us passion in terms of healthcare and lifting up other people's stories. Cause that was also the other piece. We're like, what? If we're in this boat, we know other people are in this boat, but we want to also share stories and empower other people to tell their stories. So that was kind of the impetus behind the Gritty Nurse podcast. And here we are today. I don't know what happened in January. Something just went poof. And Bam. All of a sudden we're just like number 2 Apple Podcast Medicine. We're like, what happened? What did we do differently? But I think I think it's so important to share your stories and lift other people's stories up.
Yes, and this is the beauty of podcasting. And I mean, anybody that's on the fence, I'll tell you, I'm looking at 3 of us, and our lives have changed dramatically.
Mm-hmm. That's for real.
From being putting ourselves out there for real. In terms of when you hear bullying and so forth in the workplace, like what does that look like? Like, for those that are not in the healthcare stream, maybe Sara, I'll ask you first. Like, what was that experience like?
Well, I think that when we talk about bullying, it's very covert. So it's not something where, someone's yelling in your face, someone's shoving you. It's not like that, because as you may know, nursing is 80 to 95% women. And so when women work with other women, and I'm not saying it's just a female only problem, but there are certain ways that people treat each other. And I think that in healthcare particularly, we're dealing with pressures from a lot of different fronts. So we have pressures from patients, from families. They expect a lot from us. We're working with physicians, they've got things they need to do. They're writing down orders. We have to get them done. We're dealing with pressures within our own teams. So whether or not you're a junior or a senior nurse, that kind of socially puts you on a ladder. And so there's all these pressures building up, and sometimes there's nowhere for it to go other than each other. And so I think that sometimes that is the issue. Not that that's acceptable, but that's what I've seen. And in my experience, when I moved from being a bedside nurse to nursing leadership, it actually got worse. I was not expecting that. So when women are working together in leadership, sometimes someone is threatened by you. And rather than, working together, they try the best they can to cut you down any way they can, forming alliances. I felt like I was on an episode of Survivor where it's like the last one standing wins, but actually you don't win. Nobody wins when you work like that. And so I felt that, first of all, that I couldn't say what was happening. I didn't feel safe to say that I was being bullied. Even if I did feel safe, I didn't feel like there was anywhere to turn. I didn't know who to go to for help. And it's just something that is way more common than it needs to be, and something that we need to discuss. When we talk about nurses eating their young, I feel like nothing has changed over a number of years. And we really wanted to blow the lid off that and start talking about it and talk about things that you can do to make the situation better.
Wow. And I'll tell you, as saying as an outsider, I don't know if that's fair, because I'm not a nurse, but you see it. It's quite apparent.
Oh, so you see it too?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like it's cultural. Like you'll see the way you see it in, for example, in some of the ICUs I've worked at, is that there's an overall tension, overall animosity, and it often that bullying is often carried into the younger staff. Younger staff feel like they got to walk on eggshell. The overall atmosphere in the ICU is more of a restrictive one. Everyone's just like
tiptoeing around,
anxious and wound up. You know what I mean? It's one of the things for me personally, as taking over as head of the department, is to make sure that culture is not there, that it is a positive culture, that we lift each other. But Amie, I'm interested to hear your perspective on what you amongst your conversations. Have you found, is there a way around this? Is there strategies that you found that has been effective to try and mitigate this, or is this just something you got to ride out?
It's definitely something I don't think you should ride out. I think this is where I talk about calling it out when it happens, right? I think, and I don't think it's just women. I think, maybe I'd say that, women tend to be less confrontational, but I think that you need to call it out when it happens. So we talk about, mirroring, or even just talking, having that conversation beforehand, right? Even if it's just okay, I'm going to approach this person because, they have been bullying me or they have been gaslighting me. And I'd like to kind of circle back to gaslighting, because that's huge in medicine and healthcare, that, you need to call it out. So when it happens, you just need to be hold up, what is happening here? Or even just be correct your tone like that. We're not parent and child. You're not yelling at me. You're not talking to me like that. You wouldn't talk to your dog like that. So why are you talking or treating me like that? And I think more people have to pull people aside, or even just right there in the moment. Like I said, just say, hey, this is actually not acceptable behavior. You have to model what you expect from other people. If you expect to be treated with respect, then you need to treat other people with respect. I think this is not immune to nursing. And just like I wanted to circle back to gaslighting, that's the other one that I see a lot in healthcare and in nursing leadership as well, where it is I'd say that we're all highly intelligent people, right? You're a physician, we're nurses with advanced degrees, so we both have our master's degree. And I would say that we're intelligent people. But it's always when you start to question your ability in terms of your intelligence, in terms of what you know, in terms of your expertise, and the person who's making you question that is belittling you in some way, shape, or form, or they're, maybe you've sent off an email and they're like, oh no, I actually didn't say that, and they're making you redo your work, or these little small insidious things. That is gaslighting. And I think most people don't even recognize when that's happening. They're just like, am I going crazy? Am I not getting this right? I thought I knew how to do this, but this other person is slowly kind of beating you down into the ground and saying, oh no, no, you got that wrong. Or even what happened to me was I was in a meeting and then I got called out in a meeting when the person was actually wrong, to put the heat on me. And I was like, how is this happening? And then, after that, they're like, oh, thank you for doing that. It's like, wait a minute. This I didn't even want to be a part of that. That was your responsibility. And I think that happens time and time again in healthcare, that gaslighting.
Wow. Hey, I'm getting pissed off just hearing about it. I think one of the things, and I don't know if you guys have found this to be helpful, that when this does happen, that having your peers, having like a colleague, a trusted person that you could lean on to say like, what the fuck? Like, am I missing something here? Am I crazy in my thinking?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I must say, for me, that's been an issue my whole career. You know, you like, especially if you guys are moving up the chain, you'll have more and more naysayers, you know, especially when people, like, we'll talk about race a bit too, but like when people don't look like you, they're more, in my opinion, they're more inclined to beat you down, whether it's gaslighting, whether it's bullying. And so to really have that, you know, support within your circles, I think is a super important one.
Well, I mean, I think Amie and I kind of were each other's person. When we were going through this, we helped each other through it. And just going back to the whole racism, I feel that in my experience, the higher up you move in any organization, the less diverse it becomes. So Amie and I would be sitting in these giant leadership meetings and we'd be looking around, and we're one of 3 or 4 other racialized individuals in the whole room, and there's 100 people. So I really think that adequate representation is important. We need to see people that look like us. The image of nursing is not just a middle-aged white woman. We need to show that we're much more diverse than that.
100%. And Amie, I would believe you would have some thoughts on this too, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely. So like you said, you know, it gets harder and harder up the chain. And I think that with myself and Sara being kind of a little bit more in the limelight, sometimes we catch flack for things that we say, but we're going to stand behind them when we know that we want to push an anti-racist agenda as well. So like, for example, we did actually say on a tweet, I'm not going to get into it all together, but we did say that there's a lot of white supremacy in nursing. It's the same thing that Sara's saying today, where we're like, you know, when we go up those power chains and we look up the hierarchy, we see that there isn't that representation. We don't see people who look like us in these positions of power. And then what happens is sometimes people in those positions of power don't like hearing that. But it doesn't matter, because I think the conversation on racism and race just in general, for some people, it's a new concept, but it's not a new concept for people like yourself, myself, and Sara. We've been dealing with racism probably our entire lives. But sometimes for others, it is startling to hear. And then, you know, we get that backlash. But I think what I always like to say is, you know, if it's startling to hear and it's upsetting you, then that's some work that you need to do introspectively on yourself.
Yeah, it's like, you know, it's like what you were saying, actually, it made me think about it when you were talking about stepping up when you're being bullied. It's one of those things that too, when it comes to racism out and for people to you know, not tolerate it, I always say you need like 5 seconds of courage, maybe 10 seconds of courage. You see that, you just get that energy and be like, this is not okay.
Yeah,
this is not okay. You know, or did you mean to say that? Because that is rude as hell.
Yeah,
that hurts.
Yep.
No, I agree.
You know what I'm saying? And I think it's the same thing when you talk about it in those, and, you know, calling it out in those meetings or what have you. And it's true. I mean, it's true. It's so true what you're saying, by the way, about being in those conference rooms, looking around at, like the BIPOC community is not well represented. And the thing I keep preaching to people that are like, does it matter? I'm like, yes, it matters. Diversity matters. It's a superpower. Okay. Because it increases your perspective.
Absolutely.
It allows you to have that wider lens. It allows you to be more patient-centric, more human-centric.
Right.
And so I could not agree with you more. But I guess those for those that are racialized that are listening, I'll argue that the stuff we're talking about, the bullying, the gaslighting, it's amplified when you don't look like the people around you. So, but I always say, I don't know about y'all, but you know, especially post George Floyd, it was just that healthy reminder that, you know, we need that representation. So like, if you have that opportunity to rise up, do it. You get a seat at the table. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's even more than having a seat, right? Because sometimes they give you the seat, right? Sometimes they're like, "Oh yeah, come sit down. You can sit here," but they don't allow you to talk. So I mean, you can't just be a face. You can't just be a figurehead. If they're going to invite you to the table, they have to be willing to hear what you have to say. Because sometimes that is the biggest piece that, they're like, okay, we want representation, we want diversity, we want that allyship. But you need to also make sure that you're listening. You're going to bring them to the table. It's also that means you're going to listen to what they actually have to say, because what they're going to be telling you is gold. So, I mean, I think that, again, it's so important to have that representation, but it's more than just sitting there. It's actually having them listen, do something, and actually make meaningful change off of, some of the things that you say and some of the things that you bring to light in terms of what they might not even recognize as something being a problem.
Amen. Amen. And, a lot of these things that we collectively deal with as a healthcare providers, the gaslighting, the bullying and the racism. I mean, it's COVID. It's hard to believe. That's not the right way to put it. There's tons of burnout right now. There's tons of burnout. Do you guys, maybe I'll start with Sara. Do you feel like it's getting enough attention? Do you think we're doing enough to try and address this currently within our healthcare system?
No, I don't think we are. I mean, we're in the fourth wave now. We've been talking about burnout since before COVID. And with every wave, I feel like nurses are trying to sound the alarm and nobody's listening. So we're dealing with huge retention issues right now. It's not a problem necessarily with recruitment, but it's more retention, because there have been studies done to find out why people are leaving. And it's alarming because nurses that are in their early to mid career are leaving. So we're not even talking about nurses that have chosen to retire early. People like myself, like Amie, we are young nurses who've got families. We should be in the prime of our careers, and they're not just leaving the bedside, but they're choosing to leave the profession entirely. And, it's a multifaceted issue. Some of it is about pay. So we talk a lot about Bill 124, which, as you know, caps the wages of nurses, but not other professions. So it's partly about pay. It's partly about the respect that we deserve. It's also a lot about the workload. So just because you're paying someone more, but you're throwing them, 10 patients at a time, it's not sustainable. And really, I think what nurses want are just the respect that we deserve, the safe workload, adequate training. We're not looking to necessarily put nurses in ICU that haven't been given the training and they don't feel comfortable as well. This is something maybe you could speak to. So I think that we're looking at a lot of different issues, and I don't even know if there's a word for beyond burnout, but that's where a lot of nurses are daily. I see posts about nurses saying, I'm done, I'm leaving. I don't even care that I don't have a backup plan, but I'm just done. I can't do this for a single more day. And that's where we are right now. I feel like nursing is in a really dark place. Since I've been a nurse, since 2007, I feel like we're kind of at the lowest point that I've seen so far in my career. And I really think that the government and organizations need to make this a priority.
Yeah. And I would just, if I could jump in there, like, it's not even just nursing. It's the aspect of talking about mental health. Like, this is where we continue to say mental health is health. And we talk about having a robust universal healthcare system, but access to mental health services are still something that many people struggle with and many people don't have that access to. I mean, if you look at wait times right now, like we know that if someone wants to see a psychiatrist at this point, you need to actually go to the emergency department and say that you're you're gravely ill, like you're going to commit suicide or whatever. Otherwise, you have like an 8-month wait list. The other thing is just, the services, the benefits that we have that surround mental health are really poor. Like if I look at hold on, I'm going to back this up. If you look at some employment records or some other hospitals in terms of what they might offer for mental health services, some places offer as little as $200. Like, what's that going to get you? That might get you an initial assessment and then nothing, right? That was one of the challenges that Sara and myself had. And we talked about that ad nauseum to say, hey, Starbucks Canada has $5,000 to $10,000. There are companies that have larger. Like, what are we doing here when it comes to mental health? And for whatever reason, I know that COVID is a huge issue. I understand, but we are not talking about the mental health aspect that is going to continue to plague people years after COVID. I imagine that there are many people that are going to have PTSD that have been working in these situations, and we need to talk about mental health now. It's not something that we should talk about afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I have a soft spot for this because my wife's a psychologist, and so I 100% agree. Like, if we're going to be serious about this, you want to address burnout and shit, how are we going to not have well-established coverage? Like, we call it universal health, but like, show some respect for the mental side to have reasonable coverage for seeing psychologists, to being able to support people during these tough times when they've, like, if we're on the theme of COVID, PTSD for seeing people die alone, having crazy amount of like anxiety, thinking that, initially in the pandemic, how worried they were about bringing COVID home when we didn't know shit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and we're not going to support our crew. And there's so much to the burnout side. And if I'm a decision maker, this is where you need to invest.
Absolutely.
Hear the voices of your people. You want retention? It's true. People are leaving left, right, and center. I'm looking at critical care, all acute care, emergency room staff. They're leaving like crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, like, think about, and like, listen, COVID aside, we're going into winter months. We are getting an aged population. They're not getting younger with the baby boomers hitting their prime resource use ages. You know what I mean? So, like, what's the solution? You know what I mean? Where's the support?
Yeah.
This needs to be amplified as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's essentially why we started our wellness program. It was like, I'll never forget it. Forgive me if I've repeated this story to our crew, but I was in the ICU mid-third wave, 3 a.m, and one of our allied health professionals were just in tears after just having we're trying to decide whether to intubate a COVID patient actually. And just the stress of the situation, she started to melt, start to cry. And I was like, man. And this person was solid, like normally like solid. And I'm like, man, if she's in trouble, this is trouble. And this. So yeah, I guess a long-winded way of saying absolutely agree. The other part of, I don't know if you guys find this too, like as our ICU staff, one of the things that came across from our nurses too is a lot of the like futile care, like the futile cases where, what I mean by that is care that patients wouldn't have wanted for themselves, but family maybe insists on them receiving it. Like, do you hear much of that or have experienced much of that? Start with Sara.
I experienced that in my previous job. So I used to be a NICU nurse, and a lot of times we'd get babies that are, 23 weeks, 24 weeks, 25. So just at the edge of viability. And these parents understandably wanted everything done for their infants. But it comes to the point where, are we causing more suffering when we know that there's a very good chance that this infant isn't going to make it, or they're going to make it with severe disabilities? So it's a real ethical issue, because we want to do right by the parents. We want to do everything we can, but we have the experience and the knowledge to know that at some point, it's just, sometimes it's not going to have the best outcome. So it's a challenge that I think a lot of nurses face, even if you're in different units. It's a real struggle, and you take that moral distress home with you. And sometimes it's hard to just put it into a box and go home, right? We're not machines. We can't just box up our feelings and then, go on to the next patient as though nothing's happened. So I think it's something we need to talk about a bit more, and, debrief situations. I think that's important for teams too. When there's been a difficult case or a death, is there time to debrief to make sure everyone's okay before we move on?
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I'm so glad you touched on that, Sara, because I think that with all of the things that's been happening, we've totally forgot that debriefing is so important. Something critical has happened. People are shook. Take 5 minutes to get the team together and be like, all right, let's have a hot debrief, and then even have a cold debrief. But how is everybody doing? What do you think we could have done differently, or whatever those questions that might be to lead that conversation? It's so important to have. And the other thing that you kind of brought up is we need to talk about, these various different principles in terms of futility. So this, again, building nurses, I guess, strength in terms of understanding ethics too, right? So like the principles of autonomy and beneficence, non-malfeasance and justice, and be like, all right, like, are we doing the right thing today? Like, should we be doing what we're doing? Are we doing too much? Are we doing too little? And bring in all those four concepts and say, like, are we doing the best we can for the patient? Because at the end of the day, that's the person that we are caring for, right? So, I mean, in my current role, we have those conversations all the time. So I'm in quality improvement and risk in the emergency departments. And we do have those conversations. But again, that's why I say debriefing is hugely important. And I think that, you know, it would be great that nurses are involved in ethics a little bit more. Because I think physicians tend to have a little bit more basis in that. And I'll be honest, the only reason I am really involved in ethics is because of my quality work. But I think that might also help with, you know, understanding some of the decisions that physicians may make when a situation like that does arise.
Absolutely. And I will just say this. I do think it's important to integrate the team when it comes to either these decisions or these, you know, when you're in these futile cases, you know, show support. Like I know when like as a NICU nurse, for example, how long you're going to be at the bedside with that 23-week-old, it's going to be 12 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're there all day. Whereas the physicians are there, I don't know what it's like in the peds world, but we're there for, you know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
To do rounds, unless something is really going wrong.
100%. So like it's a completely different experience. And to get that feedback from our staff on why this might be a concern, like I'll just full disclosure, like sometimes, you know, you start a week off in the ICU, it's your first day or your second day, and then the nurse walks up to me and grabs my hand and says, like, you know, like, are we doing the right thing right now? Like, what's going on? Like, it might not be on my radar yet or ever, who knows? But like, it's great to hear that input from a colleague that is basically at that patient's side all day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Such an important element is like creating that teamwork.
Absolutely.
So listen, one thing that with having you guys on, like, as fellow podcasters, but we're also fellow like media posse. Do you know what I mean?
It's crazy.
We do.
We are a small group. Virtual high five.
Yeah, virtual
fist
high
bump.
five. And I don't even know where to start. I'm trying to be not controversial. What's the push for you guys to do the stuff on mainstream media? Like what fuels you to do that?
I'm going to jump in with that one. What fuels me to do this, and then Sarah, you throw in your perspective, is there are not a lot of people that look like me in the media. There are not a lot of nurses that will come out and speak openly in the media, but we're willing to do it. So I think that, again, that's that representation, right? And I think that it's important to share our perspective. Like, nurses have perspective. I think that one of the things that I'm worried about and what I'm seeing is, you know, we're hearing stories of anti-vax nurses that don't believe in the science, nurses that are going to these rallies. I'm like, okay, you know what? That's not all of us. Let me share a different perspective. And then also just to show that, you know, I think there's a disillusion around what nurses do not in the public's eye, in various different forms of, you know, just the media. And I think we want to show a different side. Like, nurses are highly intelligent. We have the ability to critically analyze information, research, and talk about evidence-based procedures. Like I said, myself and Sarah, we both have our master's degree. I have my master's degree in nursing and I have my master's degree in women's health. We have the ability to talk about these things. And there aren't a lot of nurses that come out and talk to the media. So we're just like, hey, you know what? We're going to do this thing. We're going to change some minds out there. We're trying to change the image of nursing, right? I think people think that, you know, we're supposed to be at the bedside. We're supposed to be quiet. We're supposed to be subservient. We're supposed to do what the doctors tell us to do. We do that, but we do that and 10 times more. And we need to show out for our profession.
Yeah, and I want to role model the change that I would like to see. I want more nurses to be in the media and be feeling free to say what's on their minds. When we go through nursing school, and maybe this is similar for medical school too, we're always taught to care for patients. We're taught to advocate for our patients. We're never taught to practice self-care or advocate for ourselves. I think a lot of nurses don't even know what that looks like. And I read a study recently that said in the media, when they're writing about healthcare, nurses are only quoted 2% of the time. 2%. And this has actually gone down in recent years. It used to be 4%. So we really need to flip this on its head. And I think part of it is that when the media is looking for an opinion on healthcare, they most often go to physicians. But the other part of it is just the silencing and the fear that nurses feel when they're asked to speak. And we need to change that as well. We need to let nurses know it's okay to speak up. You're not revealing confidential patient information. You're not speaking badly on a particular organization or an individual. Then it's okay to talk about general issues that affect nurses in healthcare. And I think for myself, I thought the world was going to end the first day I did a live media interview. It takes practice,
So
like all these things could go wrong, but think about all of the things that aren't going to go wrong. And the more you do it, the more you get comfortable with it.
Absolutely. One of the things that you said, I want to elaborate on. Do you think in 2021, I don't want to be leading. I'm already being leading. It's too late. You think you can speak your mind on mainstream media?
You know what? I think it depends. I think there's the challenge is the ideas of what professionalism is, the ideas of what is considered controversial. I think those are the things that we're actually trying to challenge, right? I mean, we talk about white supremacy, not just in nursing, but as an overarching form. And that's not to knock white people in general. It's just talking about, where the history of some of these ideas might come and translate down towards, disadvantaging certain subsets of people. And we still see this today, right? So I think that, for example, I always give this example in terms of professionalism. Some people will say, it's not professional to have colors in your braids, or it's not professional to have an afro, or it's not professional to look a certain way. And it's like, who defined what professionalism looks like? Who decided what a professional conversation might look like? Who decided what is controversial or not controversial? And if you can answer that question in about, 5 whys, and it boils down to a certain subset, a group who holds power, then that's why we need to change the way we do things. So I've had, for example, I've been on an interview with Dr. Brian Goldman with CBC, and he's like, do you not find what you say is controversial? And I'm like, no, we're not saying anything controversial. We're saying things that people already are thinking, but they're too afraid to say. We're having courageous conversations about race and about healthcare and about mental health. And if it's controversial, then I have to ask you, why do you find it controversial? We're just talking about politics. We're talking about media. We're talking about things that matter to us. So, I mean, there is those challenges, like I said, within your workplace, these policies that, really need to be looked at and reviewed, and ask ourselves a little bit more about the question why, as to why we do things the way we do.
Yeah, I must say, we all have our, I guess it's like a threshold for bravery. Like if it's race related, let's go. It's time to step up. If it's affecting my kids, time to step up. I just find it, I'll be honest with you, there's so much that I don't express media wise because it's too dangerous. And what I mean by dangerous is it could potentially threaten your career, and not just threaten your career, now I'm not going to get a professorship and whatever. No, it's you're going to be potentially on a licensing board group saying, you got to stick with message when it comes to XYZ. That to me is the scary part. But definitely, at least my line in the sand, which is, it's always good to have that kind of that guide, has always been race related content and kids, because maybe it's the way I was raised, maybe it's just having a lot of value and justice. I've always been. It's been important to me to stick up for those that can't stick up for themselves.
Absolutely.
And that to me has always been the line.
Yeah. And I mean, I think Sara and I we don't talk about everything under the sun. Like, I think, we have our areas in which we feel much more comfortable to speak on. And like I was saying before, there's certain hills that we'll die on and certain things that, it's like, okay, that we're not going to engage in. Right. And I think you have to have that balance too. It's just like, does it make sense for me to engage in this conversation? And if it doesn't, then why would we say anything? But, for example, we have our things that are hills that we're going to be out there and we're going to, challenge the status quo. And we're going to bring that fire, bring that heat. But there's other things that we're like, yeah, that is not the hell we're going to die on today. Nope. Not that. Like, we see it on Twitter. We're like, nope. keep scrolling. Not that one today.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll be the first to admit, when you're in the media, you're in the public eye. If someone is going to correct me on something, I will stand to be corrected. If they're right, they're right. I don't have to be right 100% of the time. So I think that's important too. If there's new evidence or something that's come up and, I've misquoted something, I'm happy to correct myself. It's not that I'm the expert on everything. So on our podcast, if we don't know about something, we bring in a guest, right, to talk about the things that we don't know that much about, because we don't claim to know everything, and that's okay. But there are some things that we feel that, we have the knowledge and expertise to speak about, and that's what we speak about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, 100%. And I do like what you said, though. I think there's been a lack of humble pie when it comes to COVID response. That there's a lot of people that they'll point the finger when you're wrong, but have never pointed the finger in their direction. But I do think, because you guys, I'm looking at two future leaders. I see it, I feel it. And I do think this is an important aspect of leading, as being humble and showing that you are a human and that you do admit to your mistakes or miscalculations, and you move forward and you grow, you learn, you fail fast, if you will.
Yeah. I think with myself and Sara, even having two small kids, we know that sometimes we're like, nope, that was wrong. We messed that up. We got to figure this out. And I think that speaks to just, our personalities too, right? I think it's okay to be wrong. And we tell this to nursing students too. That's how you learn. If you think you're right in everything, or you do everything right, then I think that's more the concerning aspect. That is just I got it all sorted out. It's yeah, that's more concerning to us than saying, hey, I haven't thought about it this way, or yeah, I was wrong. I got to backpedal and I got to apologize. I think it's not a character flaw to apologize. So we're happy that if we mucked it up, we're like, okay, let's get out there and apologize, or whatever the case may be, whatever we need to do.
Yeah. And I think just with even starting a podcast and being in the media, I don't think there's anything overly special about myself. I don't know about you, Amie. I mean, I was just willing to do it. I just had the courage to do it. I don't think I was, the best person necessarily to have a podcast, but we were willing to try, and we knew it didn't have to be perfect, and we were willing to just keep going. So if there's anyone listening that wants to, try some of the things that we are doing, just get started. Really, that's all you need. You need the passion, you need, the willpower, and just start.
Yep. A microphone in your voice. That's it. And passion.
100%. This is one thing, because I also say in medicine, we attract a lot of, or in healthcare, we attract a lot of perfectionist type A's and stuff. At times you just got to do it.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing. I just was like, let's grab this mic. You know what I mean?
Oh, man.
And just went with it. And actually, this might be a good place good way to end. Has there been any, what's been your favorite? Yeah, there's a lot of options. Favorite either moment on the show, favorite way that the show has changed your life, favorite way that either whether it's an event, speaking engagement, opportunity that is came about through the show that you would in your wildest dreams you would never would have guessed would have thrown down. And maybe we'll start with Amie because you look like you're ready to go with something.
Okay. So I think it was last week, right, Sarah, that we were tapped on by Al Jazeera News. So that was wild. We're like, what? We're like, how do these people even find us? So that was wild. So we did a video with them. I don't even know if they've aired it because there was a little bit of an issue with the producer or whoever was on the show. But the fact that they reached out to us, we sent them our video. They want to still do work with us. We're like, oh my God, Al Jazeera, sure. We're like, CNN next. Who knows, right? So that's always the wild piece. But the one thing that I'm actually super excited about and super proud about is I actually posted this on my LinkedIn page where I missed my master's degree convocation. And I missed it because I had a job opportunity. Sarah knows where I'm going with this one, where I had applied for a job. And the interview fell on the same day as my convocation. And I remember saying, hey, I have my convocation this day. Like, what do you think I should do? Just trying to kind of get a little bit of feedback. And they're like, well, what's more important to you? Like your job or, going to convocation? And I was just like, in my mind, I was like, going to convocation. But I was like, okay, I got to be an adult. Let's go for this job thing. So I go to the job interview. It's they're already half an hour late. The two people were coming in and out of the room. I was like, what's going on? Then we finally started the interview and I was super nervous by this time. And then there was an interruption, like another person came into the room, then they got up and went to talk to each other and then came back out. And I'm like I've never had an interview like this ever. And so then I felt a little shook, right? I felt a little rattled because I was like, this is like the worst interview experience I've ever had. Long story short, didn't get the job, but then ended up missing convocation, right? So, and then I found out through the grapevine that they knew I wasn't going to get the job. They literally were just going through the motions. They're like, oh, here are the applicants, but we're going to just do this anyways, knowing full well that now I missed my convocation. So this year we were actually approached by U of T Faculty of Nursing to actually be the keynote speakers for this year's 2021 nursing convocation. So I'm like, you know what? I didn't get to wear my gown then, but I get to go up, wear my gown, welcome in the new class and tell them like, hurrah, you guys got this. So I am super stoked that I get to at least attend my graduation again.
That is amazing. Came full circle,
yeah.
Yo.
Yeah.
I love it.
I think for me, it's just when we get emails or we get messages from nursing students that say that they listen to us every single week because their professors have recommended us. And I'm like, they're recommending us because I guess, there's not a lot of Canadian nurses really doing podcasts. So people listen to us. And I imagine that they're discussing us in their class or in online forums. Like they're listening to a podcast, they're dissecting it. And that is really mind blowing to me. And I know that even other people that we know sit down and have these listening parties, like they'll be eating pizza or drinking wine while listening to us talk. And I still find this so weird because, with podcasting, you just speak into the wind and it's not like you're speaking in front of a live audience. So you don't get that feedback in the moment. So it's very strange for me that people are listening to us in this way. And also the fact that we get to speak to so many well-known guests, like we've had Dr. Brian Goldman on. We're going to have a couple big names coming up as well. We've had Kathy Crow on, who's a huge nursing advocate. This is just, I don't think we would have ever been able to do this without the podcast as our opportunity. So I still find that very weird. And I don't know, because with the pandemic, we really haven't met anyone in person. So that's also very strange when we met a listener. We met a listener recently. And I think she said to me like, oh, I thought you'd be taller. And I'm like, really?
Yeah, I thought you'd be taller. I thought you'd be taller. We're like, oh, TV like makes us look short.
Yeah.
Short.
Oh, that is amazing. I got to tell you too, like once we get closer and closer to the real world, you'll have more and more of those situations. Like I think it's hard to really get a grasp. Like most of you guys took off during COVID. It's hard to get a grasp of your reach when your circles are small right now. But when you're traveling to conferences again, seeing family in different parts of the country, I'm sure you guys are going to feel the love because the content is fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. Listen, let me thank you for joining the Quadcast. doing your part to what we call changing the boogie, changing the conversation, changing people's lenses. You know what I mean? This is Sara and Amie throwing down. I'm so proud that you guys were willing to come on the show. And I know it was 3 times a charm, but I have a feeling that this won't be the only time that we talk to each other.
No,
Just a feeling.
So. I have that feeling too.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Amazing. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Quadcast Nation, thanks for listening. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter at Quadcast. Leave any messages, any comments at quadcast99@gmail.com. Leave that 5-star rating, yo. It matters. It helps with the visibility of the show. Spotify, iTunes, wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate you and we love you. Check it. Solving Wellness. Yes. You know, we're changing the boogie, trying to improve burnout amongst healthcare providers. Solvingwellness.com. Join us today. Thanks so much for listening, guys. It means the world to us. We'll connect again real soon. Peace.